clinical research indicates that somewhere between 25% to 75% of human and animal subjects may exhibit marked psychophysiological sensitivity to extreme low-frequency magnetic and electric fields. Brainwave entrainment can be demonstrated electroencephalographically when subjects are in the vicinity of oscillations in the frequency range of approximately 3 to 20 Hz at intensities of below 100 nanotslas. 1 Tesla equals 10. 4. GOS. ELF fields of 6.67 Hz, 6.26 Hz and lower tend to produce symptoms of confusion, anxiety, depression, tension, fear, mild nausea and headaches, cholinergia, arthritic-like aches, insomnia, extended reaction times, hemispheric egg desynchronization, and many other vegetative disturbances. H and B field, magnetic vector, oscillations of 7.8, 8.0 and 9 Hz produce anxiety-relieving and stress-reducing effects mimicking some meditative states. It has been speculated that frequencies in this range may be the universally permeating clock frequencies or carriers on which mind or consciousness states can be impressed and interact with other life forms in the nebulous realms of ESP, psychotronics, distant healing, radiesthesia, and related paranormal but anecdotal phenomena. Coherent ELF energies have the unique and interesting property of almost lossless propagation within the Earth ionosphere cavity waveguide, and attenuation of these signals due to distance from transmitter sites is negligible. Power losses are 0.8 dB per million meters. The magnetic vectors, unlike electrical, E-wave, components, permeate any substance and cannot be effectively shielded, even by iron, mu metal, lead, copper, Faraday cages, etc. The established physics of radio propagation therefore suggests that vast geographical areas can be readily mood manipulated by transmissions of M-energy within the Earth ionosphere cavity waveguide. The accidental discovery in 1938 of the Luxembourg effect, by which a transmitter of relatively low power, fed to an antenna array producing a circularly polarized signal, can piggyback to any pre-existing RF energy source and produce disturbances of the ionosphere at any frequency desired, which then modulates all other energies within that waveguide, is fully described in the literature of 40 years ago but probably forgotten or overlooked by today's technologists. Here is some history and background on Robert C. Beck. His personal interest in egg and consciousness dates to 1969 when he became fascinated with the rediscoveries of Joe Camilleri and the conscious control of brainwaves via biofeedback. He developed sensitive and reliable monopolar instrumentation for this purpose under the Alphametrix trademark. In the course of traveling, lecturing, teaching classes and demonstrating this egg equipment, and because one of his personal interests was in parapsychology and consciousness research, Robert had the unique opportunity, and reliable instrumentation at hand, to make electroencephalographic recordings of the brainwave patterns of a number of truly exceptional subjects in the US and Hawaii who were famous or who had demonstrated established reputations as psychics, healers, medicine men, dowsers, etc. Since Robert had a wealth of personal contacts in both the scientific establishment and psychic underground communities, he was fortunate for the opportunity of meeting and being allowed to wire up and instrument a cross-section of sensitives from vastly different disciplines, ranging from charismatic Christian faith healers, to an authentic Hawaiian kahuna, to practitioners of Wicca, Hex, Santeria, radiesthesia, radionics, seers, ESP readers, psychics, etc., etc. A striking number of these authentic sensitives exhibited a nearly identical egg signature when reporting that they were in their working state of consciousness, a state persisting from 1 to several seconds intermittently during the altered state of consciousness phase of the paranormal activity. The signal appeared to be an almost pure sine wave of up to 25 microvolts as read monopolar, frontal to occipital, midline, and 7.8 to 8.0 Hz in frequency, or on the alpha-theta borderline. This serendipitous discovery was unexpected, in that although the subjects were practicing opposing disciplines, and coming from totally disparate teachings and viewpoints, and would barely acknowledge the existence or authenticity of practitioners outside of their belief system, they all appeared to be marching to the sound of the same cosmic drummer when in an altered state of consciousness. After replicating this observation a number of times at sites thousands of miles apart, the obvious question arose that if these exceptional people, unbeknownst to each other, were falling into the same cosmic consciousness mode, what or where was the signal to which their brain waves became entrained? What was the drummer? Is there a clock or synchronizing signal present? In 1952, physicist W. O. Schumann postulated mathematically that our Earth and ionosphere constituted a cavity waveguide whose physical constants and magnetic field would oscillate at a resonant frequency identical to the range of human brain waves. In 1962, our National Bureau of Standards Division of Radio Propagation reported the actual physical detection and instrumental recordings of these signals, and as predicted, tracings were indistinguishable from encephalographic recordings from human brain waves. This newly discovered phenomenon was dubbed Earth brainwave. Since there is a pronounced node in these Schumann resonances at 7.8 to 8.0 HA, the question of possible EEG and DLF interconnectedness appears to be an irresistible area for investigation. In 1973 a professional coil fabricator duplicated the Schumann pickup described on page 313 in the Journal of Research of the National Bureau of Standards, Division of Radio Propagation, Volume 66D No. 3 May to June 1962, and Robert perfected an extremely low noise, highly filtered amplifier capable of recording and displaying the naturally occurring magnetic oscillations surrounding our biosphere. Robert's intention was to contact as many of the sensitive subjects from his first study as feasible, and this time make simultaneous EEG and DLF records and compare the signals for frequency and phase coherency. This was done on a more limited scale than in the original phase of investigations. In a few instances, careful analysis revealed episodes of absolute entertainment during the brief seconds when sensitives reported being in their altered states of consciousness. Unexpected variables emerged, such as reliability factors dependent on lunar phases and time of day. This study was extended to test the theory that if a very small percentage of subjects, by virtue of hereditary factors, or religious or metaphysical discipline, or meditative practices, had sensitized some portion of their minds or brains to act as an extremely sensitive dual conversion superheterodyne receiver, would it be possible to remotely sense, amplify, and display this real-time drama to less sensitive subjects whose heads were as unresponsive and unselective as a crystal set, so that they too could mimic the highly organized psychic abilities of the trained seer? Late in 1973, apparatus was built for pulsing a miniature lamp held in an empty eyeglass frame as a real-time photic stimulus that would cause an evoked potential in step with the ELF cosmic drama. This was moderately promising, but marginally successful because of the individually variable delay of about 100 milliseconds, between the onset of the stimulus and its response. The next effort at inducing psychic awareness was to place a 9 feet diameter coil of about 100 turns of number 28 magnet wire on the floor of the laboratory, and expose subjects to the real-time magnetic replica of the highly amplified Schumann signals sensed at a remote location to avoid feedback. Results with individuals and groups experiencing this magic circle were dramatically successful. The third-generation investigations were extended to determine if subjects' brain waves could be influenced by artificially generated magnetic oscillations of sine waves of low intensity and at specific frequencies within the ranges occurring naturally. Some subjects exhibited absolute brainwave entrainment over the range of approximately 6 to 14 Hz and at signal strengths of approximately 100 nanotslas. Onset of phase, frequency lock-on averaged from 1 second to 4 seconds from the time of switching on the artificially ELF generator, and would sometimes last for the duration of the stimulus, usually 10-second episodes. One subject, Mr. AP, aged 54, displayed absolute entrainment when he was placed inside a triple-shielded magnetic, iron, and triple electrostatic, copper, Faraday cage. The artificially ELF stimulus was originating from a pocket-sized battery-powered device positioned outside the shielded room and 12 feet removed from the subject. Tuning the device over a wide frequency range caused subject's EEG to exactly follow the stimulus. After demonstrating the neurological responses of sensitive individuals, and doing preliminary mapping of subjective states as reported for various specific frequencies, defined to 1/100th of a Hertz on a digital frequency counter attached to the ELF generator, Experiments were undertaken on a broader scale with totally unaware subjects, such as customers at local coffee shops during rush hours. This obviated the variables of suggestion, expectancy or hypnosis. Anecdotal data amassed suggesting that a pocket-sized transmitter at power levels of under 100 milliwatts could drastically alter the moods of unsuspecting persons, and that vast geographical areas could be surreptitiously mood manipulated by invisible and remote transmissions of energy. Tests were rapidly abandoned after dramatic proof because of ethical considerations. It is well known that naturally occurring Earth ionosphere magnetic oscillations will vary slightly in frequency diurnally, monthly, full versus new moon, and indefinite cycles related to sunspot activity. This may well explain observable full moon craziness. Resonant frequencies are also affected by Earth, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Jupiter, Sun gravity vectors. There is well-documented correlation between these geophysical phenomena and episodes of political unrest, mood alteration, and health cycles, as supported by a vast technical and medical literature. Our drama seems to affect all life forms. An excellent reference source of widely unrelated phenomena dramatically tied to our Earth's geomagnetic cycles is Peterson's man. Weather. Sunday cited in the bibliography. By artificially amplifying or altering or distorting these geomagnetic fields, or transmitting specific and coherent frequencies, vast segments of Earth's populations could be affected. This now becomes an attractive modality of psychological oceanic warfare, or intentional modification of moods that could reflect in areas ranging from time-specific insomnia to stock market fluctuations. There have been recent epidemics of 4 o'clock to 5:30 a.m. worry, insomnia coinciding with the 9 Hz Schumann dropout as observed in journals of geomagnetic research. On several occasions within the last few years, Roberts' laboratory began detecting wave trains in the ELF ranges that could not be of natural origin. These may or may not be related to recent Soviet transmissions of radio energy spread over broad segments of the frequency spectrum ranging up to 28 MHz. Danish monitoring stations report that peak powers of these signals are on the order of 40 megawatts. Transmitters are presumably located near Riga or Gomel. Transmissions have disrupted lawful radio communications throughout the world, and have been protested by many nations. The Soviets have not given an adequate explanation of the purpose of these tests. An early supposition assumed Soviet experiments with over-the-horizon radar. Perhaps the psychoactive M components are unexpected side effects of this new technology. Canadian Department of Transport monitoring sources have established that spectrum analysis of these strange signals appear to be higher harmonics of a fundamental frequency of 6.67 Hz. The Tesla F.O. The signals are modulated with pulses with repetition rates of 5 to 15 pulses per second, usually 10 Hz. Besides modifying the electrical, ionic, and stratospheric jet stream equilibrium weather motion factors, the signals fall precisely within the windows known to be psychoactive. The Canadians report alarming mood alterations in certain areas of eastern Canada, such as near Timmins and Kirkland Lake, Ontario, which observers believe are linked to Soviet transmissions. Since both theory and laboratory tests prove that magnetic, H-wave, shielding is impossible at these psychoactive frequencies, even with highly sophisticated multiple ion or mu metal shielding, it can be speculated that ELF signals can be a powerful potential weapon with global capabilities and psychophysiological warfare. The wavelength of an 8 Hz signal is 22,159 miles. Robert felt that tests should be undertaken with a number of remote ELF sensors that can be made directional in order to establish by triangulation the sources of these recently detected man-made disturbances, whether originating from offshore or domestically. ELF data should be correlated with data monitored from Soviet transmissions that can be detected on commercial shortwave receivers. These two modalities can be in turn correlated with human or animal egg recordings. Note: this was done the 25th of May 1978 with positive correlations, RCB. ELF as a modality for mood manipulation is a demonstrated reality. And there is a strong possibility that it has been implemented since 1975 by the Soviets, intentionally or accidentally as an unpredicted side effect of local standing waves or irradiation of power lines. This speculation is being explored currently by a network of independent scientists working in the disciplines of psychophysiology, geophysics, radiopropagation, pharmacology, physics, electronics, and psychotherapy. A bibliography of pertinent medical and technical articles and books is attached to this report. Possible countermeasure proposals embrace psychopharmacology, adaptive desensitization, and the utilization of personal low-powered, milliwatt magnetic oscillators which by the law of inverse square will override hostile signals, man-made or natural, with beneficial frequencies. An interesting device of this nature with possible countermeasure capabilities is the VitaSat instrument designed by W. Ludwig for limited distribution and testing in West Germany. One model of this device is the size of a cigarette lighter and has a claimed battery life of 2 years. Frequencies are user-programmable over the range of 1.25 to 19 Hz by activating specific combinations of switches. This transmitter generates spike wave pulses when a mu metal core of extremely high permeability is driven to beyond saturation with a single transistor and coil. Effective range is claimed to be about 1 meter. This is sufficient to ensure proper synchronization of the wearer's biological clocks, circadian rhythms, and possible coherency of left and right hemisphere neuronal firings. Ludwig claims cures for a broad spectrum of vegetative disturbances similar to the characteristics of a frequency modulation discriminator, Foster-Seeley. The brain cells appear to latch to the highest amplitude pulses in their proximity, and unlike AM detectors, will reject background noise and pulses of lower intensity. The analogy would be that a small transistor radio held up to a listener's ear would drown out a nearby rock music band with thousands of watts of audio amplification. Similarly, a milliwatt device worn on the body could override a hostile transmission of megawatt power at a distance. While almost everyone is familiar with electronic heart pacers capable of ensuring proper heart rhythms, few are aware of recent research establishing that brain waves and other biological functions can be influenced at great distances by magnetic pulses of critical frequencies. There is promise that such devices, when tuned to highly specific beneficial rates, could be of value in stress modification, tension and anxiety relief, dyslexia, psychotherapy, insomnia, confusion states if caused by left and right hemisphere desynchronization, headaches, sexual dysfunction, and many other conditions. However, much like the initial application of atomic energy, the first large-scale implementations of ELF discoveries appear to be destructive. Robert invited other interested investigators to replicate and verify his observations. A brief disclosure of his procedures follows. A human subject, selected for sensitivity, is wired to a battery-powered, totally isolated EEG amplifier. The output is recorded on one or more channels if chart, or, preferably, fed as an FM/VCO to channels of magnetic tape. Monopolar electrodes were frontal to occipital, midline. Simultaneously, but with electrical or optical isolation sufficient to eliminate crosstalk, the output of a magnetic signal detector, Schumann coil, is chart recorded or fed to its separate magnetic tape channel. 7. The Schumann coils typically consist of 50,000 to 250,000 turns of number 38 magnet wire wound on a ferrite, soft iron, or mu metal core. Coil axis is oriented to magnetic N5 and connected to a separate amplifier having a bandpass of 2 to 40 Hz, a noise figure capable of seeing 0.1 microvolt RMS at 10k ohms, and 100 dB. Or better rejection of frequencies of 60 Hz and higher. With proper subjects, phase and frequency EEG lock-ons can be easily observed by inspecting the chart recordings, or if measurements are made in the field, by later observation of the magnetic tape records after signal recovery on paper charts or dual-trace storage scopes. Technopathic 214. My initial transmitter of ELF signals consisted of a phase shift, pure sine wave oscillator whose output was fed to a 10He soft iron core inductance of 1200 ohm DC resistance. Power level was 9 volts at 0.7 mA, or 6.3 milliwatts. This device could cause EEG modification and mood alteration in subjects at up to 10 feet. A higher power device constructed in 1973 provided greater effective range, as was expected. Highly specific modulating and carrier frequencies must obviously be withheld for fear of potential misuse, as are keyhole and waveform data, also details of the multiple source devices producing soliton ELF magnetic standing waves. Robert's investigations began in 1970. Early research in consciousness modification by external non-chemical stimulus was undertaken in the following areas. Photic stimulation of the subjects by miniature lamps, both cold cathode, phosphors, and filament, and strobe. These light sources were either driven by oscillators or by the subject's amplified brain waves in real time and later, with delayed and phase-modified pulses to pump peaks. Exposure of subjects to voltage gradient oscillating fields, and electrostatic, modulated, fields. Exposure of subjects to pulse-modulated negative ion generators, typically, 20 kV DC sources of corona discharge modulated by mechanically rotating screen shields or by carefully adjusted spark gaps that would arc over and short the output at frequencies centering on the 8 Hz range. Exposure of subjects to actinic stimulus of nearly monochromatic red-green-blue pulses of light through a fiber optic display device, held close to the left or right eye. Phase and frequency of each channel was selectively varied in efforts to excite red-green-blue rod and cone receptors independently and evoke standing wave potentials in specific sites of the occipital cortex. By selective excitation of both eyes with delayed pulses, evoked standing waves occurred. Audible click stimulus was explored, as were infrasonic, ultrasonic, 28 kHz, and phase-shifted sound fed to left and right ears. Audio-modulated 100 kHz electrostatic fields were tested. In 2 series of tests, the amplified, filtered, and clipped, about 200 MV, real-time human signals were fed directly to the head via surface electrodes. This approach was dramatically psychoactive, and abandoned in 1974 as dangerous after subjects experienced LSD-type visions. At this time, they prefer sinusoidal, not pulsed, triangular, square, sawtoothed, etc. waveforms. Fundamental frequencies are psychoactive, but can be enhanced by audio modulating them onto compound carrier frequencies, introducing multiple sources, generating soliton waves, etc. We feel that much data has been overlooked by other researchers not specifying the precise frequencies under investigation to accuracies of 0.012. 001 Hz. There is evidence that long-chain molecules near liquid crystal boundaries may simulate coherent dipole arrays with very high Qs. Biological signals are after all at the opposite end of the electromagnetic spectrum where communications frequencies in the VHF and UHF bands are specified to 0.005% and better. These investigations have been undertaken privately as a personal interest by Robert. They have been totally funded by himself, and are in no way connected with any outside interests, either governmental or commercial. Results have been reported on an informal basis via limited personal communications with other interested parties. Highly specific frequency and advanced waveform data are proprietary. Precise technical details on low noise biological and geomagnetic amplifiers, filters, Schumann detector coils, now into our 4th generation devices, practical and inexpensive voltage-controlled oscillator and FM discriminator circuits for cassette tape recording of ELF and EEG signals and data, practical and inexpensive modifications to digital frequency counters extending their ranges to 1/100th of a Hertz, suggestions for recording and displaying and analyzing these signals, etc., etc., can be made available to other serious and informed research workers who have a responsible interest in this subject. We feel it wise to withhold only the data on hemispheric desynchronization frequencies. The instruments and hardware used in this study can be made available for inspection and evaluation. Emphasis in this report on ELF magnetic phenomena rather than details of results of related psychoactive modalities is based on the conclusion that the physics and propagation characteristics make this the most viable choice of technically feasible global mood manipulation.